some very interesting projects where we have a very security-focused succession or solution developed with AVD.
Virtual desktops have been around for a while.
Always the year of it.
Almost a year.
That's no. It's been a while longer than that.
Is it carved in stone with dinosaur footprints over the top of it?
Yeah, there was this guy coming down from a mountain with some stuff.
Okay,
One of the other things that's also changed with this is going from a shared terminal server or metaframe infrastructure to doing virtual desktops, which are inherently individual. On the terminal server space or metaframe space, you used to share one cluster of servers, which you shared a session on. You have most of your stuff running in Azure. You want to have your desktops as networking-wise close to the services and applications you use.
Usually, I would think it makes no sense to shut down the on-premise virtual machine, but while Microsoft is asking also money for the runtime of your Azure Virtual Desktop on-premise on your hardware, it can also, and it makes sense, to use autoscaling on-premises.
Honestly, being able to run your desktops in Azure, it makes a lot of sense.
Hello, everyone, and welcome along to this podcast. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Marcel Mura from Cologne, who is a Microsoft MVP specializing in Azure. Hello, Marcel, and welcome along.
Thanks a lot. Happy to be here.
So give us a bit of insight into what you do. You're an MVP. I'm assuming that's a Microsoft very important person. Is that how that works?
I wouldn't tell it in this way. MVP stands for Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. So that is a nomination for working in technologies, sharing ideas, and also things around technologies with the community. That is a program where it stands for. And I'm an MVP for Azure and also since last year for remote desktop services. So where Azure Virtual Desktop is part of.
So you're just blocking everybody else out, and you're having all the MVPs to yourself. Is that the way it's working?
Blogging is a part. It's also speaking and sharing, mostly sharing.
Nice, good stuff. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So what is your primary focus these days? Let's say.
Yeah, that changed over the time. So I started 21 years ago at the company acquired by Proact now, and today I'm working in the area where we are convincing our customers to do nice technologies with us. And what I mostly do in this perspective is talking about desktop virtualization with customers, how to change from one solution to another solution, how to start with desktop virtualization. So that is what I'm mostly doing, and also doing projects in this area.
So I mean, you work with Christian. We're sorry about that, but you work with Christian on a relatively regular basis. Is that right?
From time to time, through both technologies, so security, desktop virtualization goes hand in hand. For we need also security on the desktops.
Special, some very interesting projects. Maybe we can take a look on that back later, where we have a very security-focused succession or solution developed with AVD, right, Marcel?
Let's face it. I suppose virtual desktops have been around for a while. I mean, I was doing a bit of digging.
Always the year of it.
Almost a year.
No. It's been a while longer than that. But I'm just going to make a snarky comment about it's always the year of VDI, except when it isn't, which is every year. So that's also a thing.
So what have we got? So RDP, terminal services, Citrix/Zen Desktop, VMware View/Horizon, all that sort of stuff. So it's been going for a long time, hasn't it? And have you been doing that since the start, Marcel?
Oh, I started my first project in this technologies a long time ago. That was during my studies. It was 1999, and it was a big preparation to survive the year 2000s in the industry.
We all made it through.
So yes, for a while.
So 99, we're talking WinFrame or MetaFrame?
MetaFrame.
Right.
So the new stuff which you can buy for money was MetaFrame this time.
Yes. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, that's a Citrix product.
I used to be certified on MetaFrame 1.8, I think, at one point.
I was a CCA, a Citrix Certified Administrator and Enterprise Administrator, a long time ago.
I think I have my kind of business card badge thing here still in my office, actually, in the cupboard behind me somewhere. So.
Is it carved in stone with dinosaur footprints over the top of it?
Yeah, there was this guy coming down from a mountain with it, some stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
Oh, yes, remember.
It's about the same time as I got my netwear qualifications. Right. Okay. Maybe slightly earlier. But to be fair, you're right. I think Christian Moan. The fact is, the VDI has been like, oh yeah, everybody's going to be doing VDI for years. But I mean, would you say that it's now come of age, or would you say that really it's still something that hits specific verticals or specific business needs, and really is not ever really going to be everything? What's your thoughts, Marcel?
Yeah, I would say that. So even in the year 2000s and a bit later, we called it's a bridge technology, because it helps you to provide the old build application to, this time, modern devices. And that is all only for this phase, or it was mentioned to be only for this phase, until each application is a fancy web app or web-based application. This time, I guess it was called, what was the name? A different name like today, but it was always to bridge the time so that the companies can change the Java application to web application. But 20 years later, we are also talking about this bridge technology. So I guess it's a technology which had a long lifetime, and it's still used while companies still have applications which are not web-based, running as an executable on Windows PC. And today, I would also add that there's also a different reason why that is still used. That is to secure application and also web application and data not on the desktop, only exist in a data center or in Azure, the private or the public data center of companies.
Absolutely. So it allows you to completely isolate that application to an area that you can properly control. Whereas we find it difficult to control customers, users' desktops, should we say.
Yeah. And even if in a browser, if companies maybe have some web application, then the browser is also secured from the end device or separated from the end device. But it was always, and you talk about vertical, it was mostly used to bridge the time when applications are more modern, and that is not happened right now. And if I think about vertical, it's mostly used by companies where companies has one headquarter with a data center and a lot of different locations where the peoples are working in today, more home offices, or if I think on insurance companies in the different cities with the small offices connected via a desktop virtualization to a data center where the backend is running.
Yeah.
So there's also a bunch of other good use cases for it as well. I've been involved in end user computing, but not so much on the Microsoft side of things, but on the old VMware side of things with Horizon, which is now Omnissa, right? Split out from Broadcom. Broadcom didn't take the Horizon portfolio, just to clarify that. That split out in a different company and sold out again. So Horizon and those products are no longer VMware products as such. They're owned by a different company. But in those cases, many of the designs or the reasons for doing VDI was basically very often security related, right? When you have a virtual desktop or several virtual desktops available to you, you can use one end user device to connect to a central repository and connect to whatever security boundary you want to be inside of, or which kind of security clearance zone you're in. But you can access them from one device, and that device doesn't natively speak networking-wise with the section your desktop is running in. So it's also useful for kind of separating and isolating environments from each other as a security boundary as well.
Absolutely. A lot of time we often see those technologies used as jump servers, basically, as you describe, but also for external people coming in on a temporary basis, for example, or as Marcel said, where you have so many distributed users, which might not even be in their own company, but still somehow connected to the systems of the larger entity, where it just makes sense to use it in a central managed way, and then only giving the access in a secured way, even with 2FA in the first place and stuff like that.
So it used to be called BYOD, didn't it? Bring your own device. So you'd have situations where you would bring in as a business, you would bring in a contractor, and that contractor would bring their own laptop with them, and then you would provide them with access to the required applications you needed them to see, but they wouldn't be able to see anything else. And you weren't really plugging them into your network as such. They were almost using the internet maybe to be able to go and get those applications. So it does provide a good degree of isolation in that respect.
Yeah, and unless you do it wrong and it becomes bring your own disaster, but that's a different thing.
That's great.
So, Marcel, when you go like 20 years backwards, fast forward to now, what has changed in those 20 years in the technology? Because we said, yeah, it was basically the same from the idea behind it, but I think technology-wise, there must have been a lot of changes.
Back when we were talking Citrix, MetaFrame, and WinFrame, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Christian, but you used to be able to present a desktop or an application as part of that. You could present either. Is that right? So yes. Surely that's it, isn't it? What else is there from that point forward? If you could do it back in the day. Sorry, go Marcel.
There's not so many change at the end. At the end, it's all about, like you mentioned, delivering desktops or application visualized to the device, to the endpoint. There are a lot of change in acceleration of videos, audio. There was a lot of change also in the protocols. In the early days, only TCP. Now we are mostly doing this via UDP, so that you have a more performant sessions, and also that we can do video sharing in this. If you think on Teams, for example, what I see on the vendor, there was a lot, or there was a great or larger change. So I also started with Citrix. In the early days, it was nearly only Citrix, which can be used in the enterprise. So that is also the reason why I started with that, and also continue later on my professional work doing Citrix projects, large projects. But for some years, 2020, that changed a bit. While Microsoft as a new player started with Windows Virtual Desktop, today Azure Virtual Desktop, and they were lucky because it started also with COVID, where we need more and more desktop virtualization, while companies sent their people to work at home. And for Microsoft, that was a lucky point, because they had the compute performance in the Azure data centers. They had and have a product like Windows Virtual Desktop that they today Azure Virtual Desktop. So they become more and more important. And that also, while we have seen in Citrix or in VMware some change regarding ownership, price stability, or the opposite of that more and more companies think about, is Citrix the big, great solution? Does it fit for me? Or if a smaller solution like Azure Virtual Desktop is good enough? And that is where we are working on doing projects with AVD, sometimes coming from Citrix.
Citrix is still the best from that perspective. Is that what we're saying? From a protocol perspective, it may be better than Microsoft, but Microsoft is more convenient and cheaper. Is that the general gist?
I would say that is that's not so easy. So if you're doing 3D things like engineers does, then I'm pretty sure that the Citrix protocol is still a bit better. But mostly we are talking what is good enough, and not what is the best with the highest price. And if I think what is good enough for a common price, then often Azure Virtual Desktop is good enough.
Yeah, that's kind of been Microsoft's mantra all the way, right? Provide something good enough for most people, right? So if you hit 80% of everyone, you're good, right?
Yes.
The last 20% can go somewhere else. That's fine, as long as you cover the 80% base of it. But one of the other things that's also changed with this is going from a shared terminal server or MetaFrame infrastructure to doing virtual desktops, which are inherently individual, right? It's one desktop, one user. On the terminal server space or mainframe space, you used to share one cluster of servers, which you shared a session on, and you didn't have your own operating system installed. You didn't have your own dependencies installed, which also was a problem, right? Because one application required something, another application required something else. They would headbutt and it wouldn't work on the same machine. So you had to create a different cluster for that. And perhaps even then, back then, share that application back to the original cluster where the connection happens. And you get this spaghetti kind of infrastructure to get everything to work. So good old Windows DLL hell kind of thing, right? Where things didn't work together. Now, when you get a desktop, when you log in, it's kind of your own, call it personal environment. And what you do doesn't affect what someone else on the same shared platform does in the same way. It uses the same compute and storage resources, but it doesn't directly affect the operating system's performance or which software is installed and whatever. So it's better segregated now than it was when we used to do kind of individual sessions on a shared host, which is also a different thing.
Is it Marcel? Because when I remember correctly, we have different possibilities with AVD, right? The kind of the model that Christian just proposed, where it's one virtual desktop per person, but there are also like shared session hosts, right, where you can have multiple people on the same machines. When do you recommend which system to your customers?
Well, that's pretty easy. That is mostly a question of money. Typical Office user using SAP, Office, and so on, they are working mostly on the shared desktops. Multiple users on one virtual Windows system. In Azure Virtual Desktop, for example, same is true for Citrix. And if you have developers who need administrative privilege while they are developing application, they need their own virtual computer, their own Windows. You can do both with Azure Virtual Desktop. And even for the personal one, you have another option that would be Windows 365, which is also a personal, not consumption-based model. That is a license model.
There are 2 points here that I'd like to go back to. Firstly, are we saying that Microsoft caused the pandemic just to increase the consumption of AVD? Is that what we're saying? Are we saying that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just
we don't go into that direction. We don't talk Bill Gates
a good
here.
trap.
No.
I think I've seen something about Bill Gates and vaccines.
No,
I'm not going there.
No, please no. There are other podcasts talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think
they probably are.
I don't think we need to be associated with those. So yeah, I think it's good to stop it there.
Okay, good. The other thing as well, though, is so Marcel, from the point of view of creating individual desktops for people, or creating a terminal session within a terminal server, are there big licensing differences to that? I know there used to be. Is that still the case?
Not in the Azure Virtual Desktop world. That is so. All users are licensed if they are using or if they are having a Windows 365 license. There are different kinds of license. Mostly companies have license for their user in this way so they can use it if they are using Windows 11 or 10 multi-user. So the new Windows client operating system, which can also work as a multi-user. Then you are completely licensed. And that is a different if you compare to Citrix, where you have to pay additional fees on top.
And this is it. And I suppose to a certain extent, it's a common model that Microsoft have adopted over years, isn't it? We all end up paying for services that we maybe don't necessarily use, so that when it comes around to it, when we have a choice to include that service, we go, oh, we may as well take it. We were already paying for it. So there's a lot of that with regards to the way that licensing model works. Yeah,
which
it's quite clever.
Resembles what Broadcom's done as well. So yeah,
seems to be a model in the industry, I would say.
Still better.
There is a difference there, right? But your desktop, if you need to have local admin privileges to do stuff, install things, you can't do that in a shared session, because that would be, if everyone had local administrator access in a shared session host, you could pretty much just turn it off. It wouldn't work, right? So, but that's where it's evolved. It's gone from being a terminal shared session only to being the option of doing a full desktop or a shared solution, right? Depending on the business requirements you have. And that kind of flexibility is also what makes this interesting. In addition to, I mean, the Azure desktop solution here. If you have most of your stuff running in Azure, you want to have your desktops as networking-wise close to the services and applications you use as possible, right? So offering a remote desktop or virtual desktop or shared session, whatever, into that Azure tenant has local network access to the services you use, and you don't have to traverse your link to whatever office you have or home office or whatever for the actual application data. All you transfer is the screen image, right, or the stream, the graphic output from Windows. And that's also a use case, right? Because as more decentralized we get as users, it gets harder to manage the networking latency and networking issues you might have on travel or home office or whatever. And keeping applications close to their original data and their original services makes a lot of sense in that regard. So I guess that's also a driver for the adoption of this, right?
Yeah, this, and there's also one another advantage. If I think about SAP, for example, if you would provide the SAP client to all the notebooks, the endpoints in the world or in the country, and you have the challenge to update the SAP backend, and immediately at the same time the clients, that wouldn't work. While you always have the delay between you reach out every endpoint, and if you do it in the end user computing, you could update the SAP backend and the terminal server, session host, Citrix worker at the same time or close together, and then all users have the advantage or the needed new versions available. So it's also a big point which I figured out over the last year, which is important so that you can manage that.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of good use cases for virtual desktops, right? I mean, there's manageability, the security, there's the connectivity part of it. So there's a lot of really good business use cases for doing things like this, but you have to just ensure that you're doing it the right way. Because if you provide your users with a desktop experience that is worse than their local endpoint, you're not going to have a lot of fun with it. So that's where I've been the times I've been working with Horizon. The goal has always been to provide a better desktop experience than their local endpoint can give them. If you do that, you're kind of winning, right?
And this is the holy grail, essentially, isn't it? And there've been, I know over the years, you end up with Citrix IDX protocol. I think VMware went out and bought an accelerator card that they then transferred into software, which I can't remember the name of.
PC over IP protocol, which was.
But the premise there was, and there've been various additional products that you've been able to buy to try and measure the user experience, because it's the user experience that's the most important. If you've got a desktop close to your application that is running within a data center, well, like you say, there's no latency really between those two. They're powering away like nobody's business. But it's what the user sees at the other end that is the most important thing. If they click a button and it takes 5 seconds for what they click to actually do something, do you ever get that visibility wise? I mean, do we have measuring tools within the solution to allow us to do that?
Yes, we have. And if I think about Citrix, they have so years ahead of Microsoft. And that is what you can sometimes see if you compare the administrative solution. So in Citrix, you have the director, which can give you a good insight into the user sessions. Microsoft also have a kind of this, but that works different. That is not so close and not so easy to use like the Citrix director. But we have the Azure Monitoring Agent, which also gives you some insights into the session. So we can see the latency since a few years also in AVD right now without having third-party solution. So there are solutions in AVD, but that is a different thing if you compare it to Citrix. But for both, and also for VMware or whoever the new company is called for Horizon, there are also solutions like ControlUp, for example, which gives you a deep insight into session information and latency.
It's also built into the one of the server-side components of Horizon now. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. The new company is Omnissa, by the way. So, but yeah,
also for end user computing.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was another company for the end user computing part.
No, Omnissa is the new kind of end user computing part of the old VMware, and everything else is in Broadcom, except for Carbon Black, which went to Symantec inside of Broadcom, and probably went there to die with everything else.
I mixed it up. So much acquisitions.
Yeah.
Symantec, where good products go to die. I mean, I don't think they're going to be adopting it as a tagline, to be honest. I don't think that's going to
I don't think they really care. But Marcel, when I think back to the Citrix and terminal projects that I worked on in the past, long time ago, there was always the question about scalability, how to size those environments in your own data center. How many systems do you bring in, which graphic cards, and so on and so on. And you always had to measure and to calculate on the lifetime of the devices. And sometimes there were people saying, oh, we could turn it off during the night because nobody's working there. But in the end, I think nearly nobody really did it because it didn't make that much of a difference. How it is that with AVD? Is it the same thought? Can you save money in AVD with turning stuff off there?
Absolutely. That is important. And I'm on your side in the past where we talk about green IT saving some milliwatts if you shut down a virtual machine. That is today on this time it was not important. Today it is important, while you have to pay for the runtime of a virtual machine. So it absolutely makes sense to shut them down in the evening if you don't need it anymore, and to start it early enough in the morning so that user can fast connect. In the first versions of Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows Virtual Desktop, that was not integrated. And also the auto scaling for personal VDIs was available last year, not so long ago. So what we did at Sepago this time was to build solution where companies have the ability to start and stop and have this auto scaling. Today, that is also built in Azure Virtual Desktop natively. So companies can use it and are using that. And that covers, again, 80% maybe of that what is needed. If you need it more complex, or if you need more than one, today it's called scaling plan, then you have to use also a third-party solution. But 80% is covered, I would say. And compute is one thing. Another thing is, and that is not what is Microsoft doing today, in Azure, you have to pay also for the storage. And not only for the profile storage, also for the disk storage. And that is available in different kind, in cheap, medium, expensive, which means slow, okay, and fast. And what Microsoft is not doing, but solution I have in mind can do that, is changing also the disk type. So make it cheap in the evening when the virtual machine is not running, and convert it to a fast, expensive one when the virtual machine is started. Yeah, so it makes sense to have auto scaling. And interesting is, if you think about Azure Local, the new name for Azure Stack HCI, where you have the virtual machines on premises. Usually, I would think it makes no sense to shut down the on-premise virtual machine. But while Microsoft is asking also money for the runtime of your Azure Virtual Desktop on-premise on your hardware, it can also, and it makes sense to use auto-scaling on premises, which is a bit strange from my feeling.
But nevertheless, we get green IT finally into the data center. That's a good thing.
As always, hitting us in our wallets makes a big difference, doesn't it? That's not the way it works.
Definitely.
So thanks, Marcel. Really, that's really fascinating. A very interesting insight. And I think from my perspective, what this says is this is a very, very mature product. It's been around for a great deal of time now, and it still definitely has the situations whereby it's the right thing to choose for customers. What are your thoughts on it, Christian? Moan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've worked a bit in this space from time to time in my close to 30 years in the industry now. I'm getting old. That's kind of scary. But it's
WinFrame and MetaFrame, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but yeah, it still has its use cases. It still has very valid business justifications for its use, even though it's been around for forever. My joke about the year of VDI is basically the same as the joke on when it's time to use Linux on the desktop, right? It's not going to happen. VDI is not going to be everything, or virtual desktops, or so, but it has a specific set of use cases that make a lot of sense. And as you said, it's mature. It works. And honestly, being able to run your desktop in Azure, if you have your infrastructure and services in Azure, makes a lot of sense. Manage your endpoints with Intune and whatever. Make sure they're secure, but provide business application access through a different layer than on bare metal desktops that can get lost and can get stolen and whatever. This way, you keep your data in Azure. You don't transfer your data in and out of Azure all the time. Everything's in there, and you get easy access to it. And it's easier to manage than a fleet of 200 desktops that you need to update the client software on. Mm-hmm. So, use cases, absolutely. Does it work? I'm pretty sure it does. I've only worked with the Horizon stuff the last few years, but it's the same thing, right?
That's insulting.
Provide end users with
to the MVP in the room there, to be honest.
No, but if it's that product or that product, I mean, the idea of centralized management of application access for endpoints makes sense, both from a security and a management perspective. Mm-hmm. So why not? It's a great use case. And being able to do that in the cloud, well, why not?
Christian Lehrer, your thoughts?
Yeah, speaking of use cases, I think this is really something to reconsider also for some admin workstation type scenarios, especially, which we didn't talk about. You have the possibility to have persistent and non-persistent environments. So persistent meaning you have your system and it stays, it has to be patched and so on and so, like a normal desktop, but in someone else's computer. With the non-persistent stuff, you have the possibility, as in the past, to recreate an environment every time you reboot it or you start it. So that really opens up new possibilities also for security-related tasks, because when you make sure that your system only is living 4 hours or 5 hours during your task, then even if it would be compromised for a time, the threat couldn't be extrapolating itself to the rest of the environment so easy. And I think that are really interesting use cases where more companies should think about, especially for their very high privileged tier 0 work. That could be really, really interesting.
Agreed. Marcel, to finish off?
Same, like both Christian said. Yeah, I would agree in all cases. And the last scenario from Christian Lehrer, the admin privileged workstation. I remember some customer project where we exactly have done this for this purpose.
Yeah, and it's. But I think the key point really is the fact that this is a bloody good product now, isn't it? That's the key point.
Yes.
And there are certain things that it can do that nothing else can do. So yeah, great stuff. Thank you very much for your time today, Marcel. That's been fantastic. Really enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
And thank you, team. And we'll see you all on the next podcast.